Hello and welcome to a new series on API 510, that is Authorized Piping Inspector. This series is intended for the people who are planning or studying for appearing for API 510 examination. This series is for them. In this series, we are going to talk about what is API ICP examination, what is API 510 examination, what is the structure of the examination, what are some examination questions that can appear. All of these things we are going to talk about in this series. This series is again only intended for the people who are studying for pressure vessel inspector examination, and obviously there are some codes and standards that are going to be similar in nature if you are studying for some other ICP examination. In that case, this series would not be effective for you guys, but you can obviously check out the other series as per your syllabus requirements. Now, what is this examination and how this examination is conducted? So API ICP examinations are examinations conducted by a trade organization known as American Petroleum Institute, and ICP is Individual Certification Program. So it is a program that certifies individuals for a certain work. Now the three ICP examinations are very common. You have API 510, that is Pressure Vessel Inspector. You have API 570, that is Authorized Piping Inspector. And also you have API 653, that is Authorized Inspector for Above Ground Storage Tanks. These are very common, but again API is a huge organization. They also have other certifications. They have some certifications for qualification of non-destructive testing personnel. They have certain qualifications for refractory inspectors. They have certain codes for auditors. They have certain certification for auditors, AQ1, AQ2 auditors, and various things are available for the API ICP examinations. But these three are more widely used, that is pressure vessel, piping, and above ground storage tanks. Now, the examination has a certain structure to it, and this structure is written in an official document known as Body of Knowledge. So API Body of Knowledge for ICP 510 examination, this is the body of knowledge that is going to be implemented from January 2024 and May 2024. So the people who are probably listening to this video are going to be in this range itself. It's the latest that I can find. So, what is this examination? Now, this body of knowledge will tell us that what is the syllabus of the examination, what is the structure of the examination, what are things to be studied or known to the inspector when he is going for the examination, or what is expected from the inspector to know in the area of knowledge where he is applying to be an inspector. So, in that case, there are multiple things that are written here. Obviously, this is for pressure vessels, so most of the things are going to be related towards pressure vessel. Obviously, we understand this, that API ICP examination are generally govern the in-service inspection of this equipment. That means this would not be used for newer constructions, but if the equipment is already in service, then API 510 would take a front seat in now repair, alteration, or inspection of pressure vessel. So API Authorized Pressure Vessel Inspector must have a broad knowledge base relating to maintenance, inspection, repair, and alteration of pressure vessels. The API Authorized Piping Vessel Inspector Certification Examination is designed to determine if the individual will have such knowledge. Following is the list of specific topics in which API Authorized Pressure Vessel Inspector should be knowledgeable. So this document tells you that what should be the knowledge that an inspector should have, and these are some topics that are listed out. So all of these topics are going to be the fair game for your examination. Now, so first of all, for example, multiple things are given here. So there are referenced publications. So these are some codes and standards that are going to be in the part of examination because they are generally going to be related to pressure vessels. So obviously, we'll talk about each and every one of them. Most of these are common with some other ICP examinations also, some are different. So the first code that we have to understand is the API 510 code itself. So API 510 is again inspection code for in-service pressure vessels, alteration and repair. So whatever the things that are laid down in API 510 are to be known by the inspector because he is working for that API 510 examination. Okay, so the entire document is subjected to examination. Next is damage mechanism, API RP 571. So API RP 571 is damage mechanisms affecting fixed equipments in refinery industry. This means that this document is common for most of the ICP examinations. You have different types of damage mechanisms that are listed down in API 571. You have approximately 62 damage mechanisms that are listed down there. So not all of the 62 would happen with your equipment, but depending on what is the service condition, what is the fluid that is handling, what is the nature of the service, what is the environmental condition, all of these things are going to play a big role in degradation of your component. And those things are to be identified as per the requirements that are given in API 571. Obviously, pressure vessel is not going to be subjected to all of the damage mechanisms. Okay, so there are about 13 to 14 damage mechanisms that are going to be more prevalent in pressure vessel examination. So we'll just focus our energy on that. We'll not be interested in what kind of damage mechanism that can happen in piping or in above ground storage tanks. We'll not consider those. We'll just focus on what is the damage mechanism that is most likely to be subjected in a pressure vessel. Okay. Next is API 572. This is inspection practices for pressure vessels, including Annex B. All other annexes are excluded. Now, API 510 is the code. Okay, so it lays down all the requirements that are needed if you want to do an inspection for an in-service pressure vessels. But it is a code. Code will generally give you minimum requirements. Okay, and code has to be certain amount of vague because it has to be implemented in multiple situations. So in that case, to supplement API 510, to supplement the code, there is a different recommended practice, that is API 572. So API 572 will tell you that how to attain the tasks that are described in API 570. So API 570 will generally tell you that you should be taking a thickness measurement of a component. But how that thickness measurement would be taken? Are you going to do UT for that? Are you going to do some other kind of method for identifying thicknesses? What should be the conditions when you are doing this? What should be the precautions that are taken? All of these things are going to be written down in 572. But API 510 will only tell you that you need to do thickness measurement. API 572 will elaborate on it. Okay, it's a recommended practice. That means it's a recommendation given by the inspector that whatever is written in the API 510 is to be followed by this recommended practice. This is the good way of doing this. Okay, next is API 576. 576 is inspection of pressure relief valves. So inspection of pressure relief valves is generally going to be common with the piping inspector examination. Here we just need to understand what are different kinds of valves and what is the inspection procedure of those valves once they are removed from the service or they are mounted back on the service. Next is API 577 is welding process, inspection and metallurgy. This is generally going to be regarded to alteration and repair of the system. So if we are doing any kind of alteration or repair, that welding procedure has to be qualified as per the requirements of API 577. Not qualified as per se, but the requirements that are needed in welding are to be followed as the requirements given in API 577. So this is a recommendation given to the inspector that whatever the welding operation is happening, is that welding operation effective enough? So what are the things to be understood while you are performing a welding operation? What are some documents that are needed? What are some non-destructive examinations that can help you to identify if the weld is correct or not? All of these requirements are given in API 577. So it's a recommendation given to the inspector so that they can perform welding operations correctly. Next is API 578. API 578 is guidelines for material verification program for new and existing assets. This means that whenever a new component is bought or whenever a component is bought for a repair operation, in that case the material verification has to be done. If the material verification is not done, then there are multiple things that can happen, because if the material is wrong for service, then some different kinds of degradation mechanism can be taken into picture. This will ruin the service life of the component. So whenever we are using some component in a critical area, some material verification needs to be done. This is generally going to be limited to PMI or mill test certificate, so some form of material verification program has to be set in place. So this also an inspector needs to know, but this is a very small code. It's generally like 8 to 9 pages of code. So it's just a general recommendation that are given. So these are some codes and standards an API 510 inspector would need to know if he wants to pass the API 510 examination. There are some other codes that he needs to know, because again, these are for in-service, but the original construction code of the pressure vessel also needs to be considered in some matters. Okay. So there are ASME publications that also we need to consider. The first is ASME section 5 that lays down all the requirements of non-destructive examination in a pressure vessel. ASME section 8, ASME section 8 division 1 is rules for construction of pressure vessels. So whenever a pressure vessel is made, whenever a newer pressure vessel is constructed, the design requirements, the manufacturing requirements, the acceptance criteria, all of these things are going to be written in ASME section 8 division 1. ASME section 9. Section 9 is welding and brazing qualifications. So whenever a welding procedure is set, whenever a operator is qualified, wherever the procedure is qualified, all of these criteria are going to be laid down by ASME section 9. Okay, so all of these things an inspector need to be known. Secondly, the last thing that an inspector would need to know is ASME PCC 2 is the repair of pressure equipment and piping. So this is common for the people who are also studying for API piping API 570 piping examination. Repair of pressure vessels and piping, we need to understand it. Not a huge part of the examination, but an examination part nonetheless. Next, inspector would need to know thickness measurement, inspection interval, vessel integrity, corrosion rate and inspection intervals, joint efficiencies, static head calculations, internal pressure calculations for different types of heads, external pressure, pressure testing, impact testing, weld size for attachment of weld sizes of welds at openings, nozzle reinforcements. All of these things are to be known by the inspector, but these things, so we have seen multiple codes. If you do the tally, the codes are going to be thousands of pages. Okay, ASME section 8 itself is 800 pages. Okay, so in that case, inspector would not need to know everything. Okay, inspector would only need to know things that are related to in-service inspection, because the inspector, API 510 inspector, is an in-service inspector. He is not an inspector that will help you to identify things when the parts are in construction. That means the inspector would not need to know some of the things that are written down in ASME section 8. Okay, so the person would not need to know all of these things. So required calculations for wind, earthquake and other stress loadings, supplementary design formulas, nozzle calculations, flange calculation, brazing calculations, ligament calculations, tube sheet calculations, all of these things doesn't need to be known by the inspector. If he knows, it's a good thing, but it is not going to be the part of examination. Again, see one more thing, that rules for natural resource vessel API 510 section 9. Section 9 is not going to be the part of examination. Okay. Next, welding procedure qualification evaluation based on the ASME boiler and pressure vessel code section 9. So the requirements of section 9 are to be known by the inspector. So here the inspector would do weld procedure review. So in weld procedure review, he would review the WPS, he would review the PQR, and he would also review the welder's qualification. Next is section 8, general welding requirements to be known by the inspector. Non-destructive examination, various kinds of non-destructive examination are available. In ASME section 5, all types of non-destructive examination are written that are going to be implemented in boiler and pressure vessel, but inspector need to know only the conventional means. So in this case, article 1 is to be known, that is the general requirements whenever implementing non-destructive examination. Article 2 is radiographic examination. Article 6 is liquid penetrant examination. Article 7 is magnetic particle examination. Article 4 is non-destructive examination of welds with ultrasonic testing. but that is not going to be the part of examination. Okay, so we are not going to talk about Article 4, but we are going to talk about how to take thickness measurements with ultrasonic testing. That is Article 23, SC 797 only. So only this is going to be the part for ultrasonic examination. You do not need to understand the ultrasonic examination of weldments. Next is Section 8 Division 1 and API 510 General Non-Destructive Examination Requirements are to be known by the inspector. Practical knowledge, these are some practical knowledge that are known to the inspector. Next is, these are some specific knowledge that is to be known by the inspector. So first is API 510 code. 510 code, the entire code is subjected to testing because that is the main code. Just Section 9 is not going to be the part of examination, and Appendix E are excluded. Apart from that, the entire document is needed. API 571, that is damage mechanisms. There are almost 60, in this case 67 type of damage mechanism, but not all of those are going to happen to the pressure vessel. In that case, for a pressure vessel inspector, only these kinds of damage mechanism are going to be interesting. So in that case, the person who is studying API 571 for pressure vessel examination just need to know amine stress corrosion cracking, brittle fracture, atmospheric corrosion, caustic stress corrosion cracking, chloride stress corrosion cracking, cooling water corrosion, corrosion under insulation, erosion corrosion, high temperature hydrogen attack, mechanical fatigue, sour water corrosion, sulfidication, and wet H2S damage or blistering hydrogen induced cracking or stress oriented hydrogen induced cracking. API 572, entire document is subjected to testing because this is a practice of pressure vessel inspection. So 510 is the guidelines that are given, and 572 is elaborating on how to do this inspection. 576, entire document is subjected to testing except for annexes. 577, entire document is needed. 578, entire document is needed. PCC2 is a repair of pressure equipment and piping. Not the entire document is not needed, but these articles are needed from that. Okay. So this is your body of knowledge. This is your syllabus that you would need to study if you are planning or preparing for API 510 examination, that is Authorized Pressure Vessel Inspector. Obviously, it's an in-service inspector. Now, let's see how that examination is structured. So this is how examination is structured. So API 510 this is not 570, this is 510. Just a minute. It's a 510 examination. Okay. So API 510 examination is structured something like this. So the examination is 7.5 hours. The entire examination lasts for 7.5 hours. In this examination, you have 170 questions that you have to solve. Out of these 170 questions, 140 questions are marked. So in this 140 questions, you will be scored whatever answers you have given, and 30 questions are going to be unmarked or pre-test questions. These questions are not marked. Even if you get these wrong, no marks would be deducted. Obviously, it would be not possible to know which are marked and which are unmarked questions, but that is the structure. 140 are marked and 30 are unmarked. The examination is in two parts. First, you have a closed book examination that lasts for 2 hours and 2.75 hours. Then you have a lunch break for 45 minutes. And finally, you have an open book examination that is going to be 3.75 hours. Okay. In closed book examination, generally you have 110 questions to solve. And in open book examinations, you have 60 questions to solve. Generally, open book examination is going to be very easy. Open book examination, even if you study for like 1 week, open book examination can be cleared pretty easily. But the main problem lies with the people, whoever I have talked with, is with open book examination, because open book examination is sometimes not that straightforward. In open book examination, you have to refer multiple codes that we have mentioned here. A person need to refer multiple of those. In that case, it can be very time consuming. There are relatively less questions. There are 60 questions, out of those only 50 are marked. But it is sometimes very difficult. So we are going to focus more of our energy on open book examination. We are going to study how to refer code, how to identify. First, the task is going to be that how to understand that just by looking at the question, that what is the code we generally need to refer, which code I should open so I can get the answer. So that is going to be very important. Open book examination, most of the energy are going to be into open book examination. But if you pass both of these, in both of these you get 70% marks, then you will generally pass the examination. Examination is going to be valid for 3 years. Your certification is going to be valid for 3 years. After 3 years, you'll just renew your certificates. Okay. Now, let's see what is the exam format. In this case, multiple codes inspector needs to know. Okay. So in this case, when you look at API 510 code, which is the main code that we have to refer, this is the main examination that we are given. It's hardly 80 pages. So this API 510 code, generally there are 9 questions for our open book examination and almost 42 questions for your closed book examination. This leads to a tally of 51. That means almost 30% of your exam is getting covered only if you read and understand API 510 thoroughly. Okay, so API 510 code will generally never skip. Okay, same thing with 572. If you understand 510, then you will understand 572 also. So in 572 there are 9 open book examination, 15 closed book examination. Almost 14% weightage is getting carried by 572. Next is 571, that is damage affecting the pressure vessels. Open book examination 12, closed book examination 8. Almost 20% of examination questions are going to be arrived from API 571. Next is ASME section 8, that is the original construction code of the pressure vessel. Open book 12 examination questions and closed book 11 examination questions, that is approximately 14% of the examination weightage. Next is ASME section 5 open book examination, 12 closed book examination, total 10% examination weightage. Okay, if a person does these 5 things correctly, then also they'll be able to pass the examination. Okay, obviously if you only have about 3 weeks or a month, then this will help you this will be very helpful for you. If you have a really less time for preparing for the examination, then focus only on these 5 areas. Okay, these 5 areas you'll generally focus all of your energy, and all the other things, if you have time then you can do it. If you don't have time, you'll generally not do it, but at least these 5 things are not to be skipped in the examination. Okay, once you do this, generally you'll pass the examination. Obviously if you have more time, then you'll also look at some other things as well. But if you have less time, then generally just focus your energy on these. Obviously, in this series, we are going to talk about each and every detail for the examination. But depending on how your preparation is going, you should be focusing your energy in things that will help you the most. Okay, that's it for this video. In the next video, in the subsequent video in this playlist or series, we are going to talk section by section about the API 510 pressure vessel inspector examination and code. Okay, so in the next video is going to be the first video, and the first topic is going to be API 510, scope of the code and what is written in that code. Okay, so please look at all of this video. This video is for API ICP examinations. Thank you.